Over the past 20 years, Samoa Joe has earned his place as one of the toughest professional wrestlers in the business. From his early days training alongside John Cena in UPW, to becoming the face of Ring of Honor, all the way to his time spent in NXT, and eventually making his way onto the WWE's main roster. Yes, Joe's voyage to the top has been a long and storied one, so join us today as we take a deep dive into his entire career journey so far in Samoan Submission Machine, the Samoa Joe Story. Nu'uafalo Joel Sanoa was born on March 17, 1979 in Orange County, California. Like many Samoan wrestlers, he wasn't actually born in Samoa, though as a direct descendant of the country, he grew up steeped in the culture. As a child, his family founded a Polynesian dance troupe called Tiara Productions, and this led to the young Joe making his stage debut at the 1984 Summer Olympics opening ceremony when he was just 5 years old. From there, he developed a keen interest in sports, playing football in high school, as well as getting involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, and Judo, with him becoming a California State Junior Champion in the latter. While wrestling was always a big passion of his too, it wasn't the first career path he tried after leaving school. In fact, for a couple of years, Nu'uafalo made his living as a mortgage broker before deciding to start his in-ring training in 1999 at the UIWA West Coast Dojo. Here, under the tutelage of Cincinnati Red, he developed quickly, making his in-ring debut after just 3 months of being there. This prodigy-like ability led to him getting noticed by WWE, and in 2000, he was called to one of their developmental brands, Ultimate Pro Wrestling, where he would feud with future superstar John Cena and even made an appearance on an episode of Jacked against S.A. Rios. After that, he became the longest-reigning UPW heavyweight champion at that time. But despite having all the promise in the world, he wasn't called up to the main roster, with Sanoa allegedly being told that he had no future in pro wrestling during a meeting with Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard. How wrong they would turn out to be. And to make a start on proving this, the Orange County native headed over to Japan in June 2001 to begin working with Pro Wrestling 01, where he would become an NWA Intercontinental Tag Team Champion with Keiji Sakota. Here, he developed the ring names of both King Joe and Samoa Joe, eventually settling on the latter as his permanent title from then on. By mid-2002, Joe was ready to go back home to America, where he started appearing for Ring of Honor and made a name for himself as Christopher Daniels' hired assassin. The hard-hitting, martial arts-based in-ring style of the Samoan quickly got over with fans, and he would be signed to a full-time deal shortly after. During this time, it was a regular occurrence to hear chants of "Joe is gonna kill you" whenever he appeared, and his opponents certainly felt the brunt of his rage as he rose the ranks to become ROH World Champion on May 17, 2003 after beating the Zebra Kid. As a champion, he was unbeatable and decimated everyone in his path for a full 21 months. This was when he had his acclaimed trilogy of matches with CM Punk, which went a long way towards putting not only both competitors, but the company as a whole, on the map. Of course, nothing lasts forever, and even the toughest fighters will fall on the right given day. This was proven when Austin Aries was able to beat him at Final Battle on December 26, 2004, finally putting an end to the epic reign that would go on to be regarded as one of the best in Ring of Honor's history. From here, Joe rebounded by winning the ROH Pure Championship on May 7th of the following year, and held onto that belt for 3 months before dropping it to Nigel McGuinness. By now, his reputation was firmly established, with everyone watching knowing that he was nobody to mess with. So when Japanese wrestling legend Kenta Kobashi made a one-off trip to the US in October of 2005, Ring of Honor booked him for a match with their former champion. Given both men's reputations for being tough, expectations were high, and the match managed to live up to these as the two went on to absolutely batter each other in an all-Japan-style war that would go on to get 5 stars in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter and even be awarded that publication's Match of the Year. After that dream match was over, it was hard to imagine where Joe could go next. Of course, the indies couldn't hold someone of his talents forever, and it was only a matter of time until a major company came calling. This company turned out to be TNA, who signed him up to a contract on June 14, 2005, with him making his in-ring debut 5 days later against Sanjay Dutt at Slammiversary. Now going by the moniker of the Samoan Submission Machine, he made quick work of Dutt, then went on to win the Super X Cup not long after, beating AJ Styles in the finals to do so. This led to a three-way match at the September 11, 2005 Unbreakable pay-per-view between Joe, Styles, and Christopher Daniels, which ended up being arguably the greatest triple threat match ever put on inside a wrestling ring, and led to yet another 5-star rating in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter, the only bout in TNA history to do so. Of course, while dominating TNA, Joe continued to work for ROH for a while yet, and also made appearances for the likes of Pro Wrestling Guerrilla while he was at it. During 2006 and 2007, he had barn burners against fellow future WWE stars in Bryan Danielson and Kevin Steen, and also played a major role in ROH's interpromotional war with Pro Wrestling Noah, having an excellent match with Takeshi Morishima and also Japanese wrestling god Mitsuhara Misawa. It was a lot to juggle though, and after a while, the Samoan decided it was time to focus all of his energy on TNA instead. He embarked on a farewell tour of the Indies in early 2007, wrestling his final match with ROH on March 4th against Homicide, and his last one with PWG a month later against Low Ki. While he would have a few more one-off appearances for the former over the years that followed, this would be the last time he would appear as a full-time roster member for either company, marking the end of an era for someone who had done so much to help build both. But now it was all about TNA. The company were building a reputation as a viable alternative to WWE by then, and a major reason for this was their X division as well as their homegrown stars like AJ Styles and Joe. Joe had solidified his importance to the promotion when he began a feud with Christopher Daniels at November 13, 2005's Genesis pay-per-view, giving him a muscle buster onto a steel chair after a tag match. This led to a storyline concussion for Daniels, and while he was out, the Samoan Submission Machine would win the X Division Championship from Styles just in time to defend it against a returning Fallen Angel at Final Resolution 2006. When the bell rang, the story of the match became about the champion's obsession with not just beating Daniels, but ending his career. He would neglect to go for pinfalls, instead dropping repeated knees on his opponent's head until the match had to be stopped. The message was clear. When you stepped in the ring with Samoa Joe, you would be lucky to step back out. It sold him as an absolute killer and someone who could not be stopped. In fact, when he later lost the title to Daniels at Destination X on March 12, 2006, he would neither be pinned nor submitted, leaving him with an air of invulnerability that is very familiar to modern-day Brock Lesnar. The simple fact was this: up until then, no one in the company could solve the puzzle of how to beat Joe in a straight fight. He went through ECW legend Sabu at that year's Sacrifice, and following this he took down Scott Steiner at June 18th's Slammiversary, adding them to his ever-growing list of conquests. The next name on that list was TNA originator Jeff Jarrett, who Joe butchered at the 2006 No Surrender pay-per-view. After the match, he left with Jarrett's NWA World Heavyweight title, telling him that if he wanted it back, he would have to come and take it from him. Jarrett had an upcoming title defense against Sting, and so in order to retrieve the belt, management had to kayfabe threaten to fire the Samoan if he didn't return it. Ever the badass though, he refused, and the belt only ended up back in Jarrett's possession after a debuting Kurt Angle got into an altercation with Joe, giving Jeff the opportunity to grab it and run. The showdown with Angle whet fans' appetites for a dream match between the two submission masters. This was further teased when they got into another pull-apart brawl at October 22, 2006's Bound for Glory, it all climaxing in them finally meeting at November's Genesis pay-per-view, where after 13 minutes and 35 seconds, the Olympic hero was able to end the destroyer of TNA's 18-month undefeated streak after he tapped him out to the ankle lock. The feud didn't end there though. It continued on into 2007, with the Samoan Submission Machine getting his win back at Turning Point and then losing the rubber match at January 14th's Final Resolution, this time in a 30-minute Iron Man match. Looking back on it now, the Joe Angle program was one of the key factors that helped take TNA to the next level back in the late 2000s, with the legitimacy of both men really selling all their fights. Unfortunately, with the introduction of Eric Bischoff a few years later, the company's original mission statement would get watered down as they started turning into WWE Light. Still, for a brief moment, they were arguably the best promotion in North America. Before any of the bad went down though, he would continue riding high, regaining his X Division title, and then, at July 15, 2007's Victory Road, teaming with Kurt Angle to win the TNA World Tag Team Championships too. Ever the lone wolf, however, the Samoan declined to partner with Angle any further after the match and kept both belts for himself, for a brief time, even defending them solo. Following this, he started a gimmick where he would tear into TNA management regularly. This was sparked after he cut a shoot promo on Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and the company's president Dixie Carter after Hall no-showed an advertised event, with it soon becoming a regular part of his character as he took his ire out on everyone he came across. This gave him a chance to let his verbal skills shine. Trash-talking had been a big part of his character since his early days, of course, when he had proven to be one of the best and most real-sounding promos in the business. And it's something that continued on in buckets as he reignited his program with Kurt Angle in early 2008. After a couple of months of multi-man matches and promo battles, the two old foes met again at April 14th's Lockdown pay-per-view, where the destroyer of TNA was able to beat Angle and win the TNA heavyweight title for the first time. Now the top dog, he went on to feud with the likes of Booker T and Sting over the next 6 months, putting on a series of great matches until the latter eventually took the belt from him at Bound for Glory 4, ending the title reign at 182 days. Now no longer the champ, Joe rebounded by forming an alliance with AJ Styles, Jay Lethal, Consequences Creed, Petey Williams, Eric Young, ODB, and the Motor City Machine Guns, calling themselves the Frontline and going to war with the villainous Main Event Mafia. And while he was a featured player in this program, Joe still demanded more, so it shouldn't have come as any surprise when he decided to turn on the Frontline at Slammiversary 2009, joining the Main Event Mafia where he felt he would have greater opportunities. This new alliance turned out to be fruitful as the Samoan was able to beat Sting at July 19th's Victory Road, and then regained the X Division title the following month. Now revitalized, he developed tunnel vision when it came to reclaiming the big prize, the TNA World title. Unfortunately though, Joe was unable to do this, losing in a triple threat match against AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels at November 2009's Turning Point, and then again to Styles at February 14, 2010's Against All Odds. From here, he would spend the remainder of 2010 climbing up the singles rankings, while aligning himself with both Hulk Hogan and Jeff Jarrett. This was until Jarrett predictably turned on him. But while 2010 had been a big year, 2011 would find him not able to reach the same levels of success as the former TNA champion embarked on a rare losing streak, getting beaten by the likes of Crimson, Rob Van Dam, Frankie Kazarian, and Bobby Roode over the course of the next few months. So bad did it get that during that year's Bound for Glory series to determine the new #1 contender to the TNA World title, he would lose all 9 of his matches, causing him to begin lashing out at everyone and interfere in random matches. It wasn't until September when he was finally able to get a win, this time over Matt Morgan. It was enough to reignite his confidence, as from there, he formed a tag team with Magnus, with the duo eventually winning the TNA Tag Team titles at February 12, 2012's Against All Odds. Yes, it had been an interesting storyline turn to take an unbeatable monster and have him be unable to beat anyone. Once it was over and he went back to his regular ways though, he felt all the fresher for it, almost like he was a new character again as he reverted to the destroyer that fans knew and loved. By May, he was back in the X Division title picture, and in the 2012 Bound for Glory series, he had a much more impressive outing, getting all the way to the semifinals before being eliminated by Jeff Hardy. On September 27th of that year, he even defeated Mr. Anderson to become the TNA television champion for the first time, and followed that up with successful defenses against Rob Van Dam, Magnus, Robbie E, and Robbie T. We were now firmly in the Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan era of TNA though, and even someone of Samoa Joe's talents couldn't avoid having some of this stink rub off on him. He became part of the much-maligned Aces and Eights storyline as a member of the Babyface Alliance trying to take them down, but the less said about that, the better. He also joined the new Main Event Mafia alongside Sting, Kurt Angle, Magnus, and Rampage Jackson, this time with the stable being portrayed as babyfaces. With these men by his side, he would spend 2013 and 2014 continuing to prove that he was one of the best talents on the roster, and even if he was being increasingly underutilized, he would still manage to get big wins over performers such as Bobby Roode and Abyss. Though, despite this, he was unable to regain the TNA World title, no matter how hard he tried. He did manage to get his X Division belt back one more time though, after beating Low Ki and Sonata in a triple threat match on the August 2nd, 2014 edition of Impact. But by now, he'd achieved just about everything he could with the company and was spinning his wheels. What he really needed was a change, and this would soon come in the form of Triple H knocking at his door. Yes, in February 2015, Samoa Joe's contract with TNA ran out, and this time around, he neglected to re-sign, feeling that it was time for him to move on to new pastures. Fans had been clamoring to see the Samoan Submission Machine inside a WWE ring for years, with many feeling he was one of the last great talents to have never jumped over. Joe was only too happy to oblige then, as he made his NXT debut at May 20th's TakeOver Unstoppable, saving Sami Zayn from a beatdown by Kevin Owens. Joe and Owens would go on to have a match at the June 17th episode of NXT, which went to a no contest, and 2 months later, he would win his first official TakeOver match against Baron Corbin in Brooklyn. Now an established player on the roster, he moved into a feud with NXT champion Finn Balor, and though he was unsuccessful in defeating the Demon King during their first 2 TakeOver matches, Joe managed to look like an absolute killer throughout each of them. It was clearly a question of when, not if then, and that question would ultimately be answered when the Samoan slaughtered Balor at a house show event on April 21st, 2016. Now the man at last, he beat Finn again in a rematch inside a steel cage at June 8th's TakeOver The End, sending the Demon packing to the main roster in the process. Even when he lost the belt to Shinsuke Nakamura at TakeOver Brooklyn 2 on August 20th, nothing would be able to stop him from dominating the brand, as Joe proved when he managed to regain the NXT Championship at TakeOver Toronto in November, becoming the first ever 2-time champion on that night. Just like he had conquered Ring of Honor and TNA before, Samoa Joe had conquered the yellow and gold brand. There was only one place left for him to go now, the main roster, and on January 30th, 2017, he made about as impactful a debut as anyone could, destroying Seth Rollins as Triple H's hired gun. He followed that up by beating the company's golden boy Roman Reigns the next week, and then continued his path of destruction when he submitted Sami Zayn at March's Fastlane. Yes, the Samoan Submission Machine was nothing less than a one-man wrecking crew on Raw, and any fears that he would be misused on the main roster were by now alleviated. Online, there were calls to put him in the ring with then Universal Champion Brock Lesnar, with many arguing that the two legitimate tough guys would have a classic should they ever get a chance to square off. Well, every once in a while, WWE gives fans exactly what they want, and July 9th, 2017's Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view was one of those times, as the company booked the program everyone wanted when Joe finally faced the Beast one-on-one. Many of Lesnar's opponents at this time had been booked to appear significantly weaker than him, but not the Destroyer. In the lead-up to the match, he took the fight straight to the champion, even choking him out on the July 5th episode of Raw. The bout itself was short but explosive, and though Joe would lose, he would impress management enough to get added to that year's SummerSlam Fatal 4-Way Universal title match that also featured Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman. Unfortunately, just when he was at his hottest, however, the injury bug struck, and the Samoan was forced to take time off after hurting his knee at an August house show. This would be the first of several injuries for him over the next couple of years, a sad outcome of the near 2 decades of wear and tear put on his body by that point. After returning, he had a brief feud with Roman Reigns before suffering a foot injury too on the January 8, 2018 episode of Raw, this putting him out of action until April of that year. When he did come back, he was drafted over to SmackDown for the first time, and would quickly make a statement there by getting a disqualification win over former TNA cohort and, at the time, WWE Champion AJ Styles at that year's SummerSlam. Despite being unable to walk away with the title that night though, he continued to be an imposing presence on the blue brand, and by March 2019, he would become the United States Champion after beating Rey Mysterio, Andrade, and R-Truth in a 4-way match, this marking his first title win while on the main roster. Now a champion at last, Joe got to have his first WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 35, where he absolutely obliterated Rey Mysterio in only 1 minute. He even got another shot at the WWE title when he fought Kofi Kingston in a losing effort at the July 14, 2019 Extreme Rules show. Unfortunately for him though, just as he was once again building up momentum, he broke his thumb during a match and had to miss several weeks of action while waiting for this to heal. Since that thumb injury, he has spent most of his time on the commentary booth, suggesting that WWE management are beginning the process of moving him out of the ring permanently. There are pros to this, of course. Joe has suffered a lot of injuries in the last few years, and as a talker, there are few who can stand toe-to-toe with him, so he's always been a welcome presence as a color analyst over the last few months. That being said, we hope he isn't done in the ring quite yet, as he's a performer who deserves at least one run with the WWE title before his time is done. There are few out there who can match his legitimacy as a badass, and based on how successful his feud with Brock Lesnar was in 2017, the company would be crazy not to try going for round 2 at some point. Either way, when his time does come to hang up the boots for good and move over to a full-time commentator role, Joe will go down as one of the very best his generation had to offer. Well guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.